Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tower Topics. I'm Ryan Sir, along with Don Helbig. Tis the season. This is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast for Kings Island fans by Kings Island fans because that's who we are and that's who we care about.
All right, Don. So we're a little bit of a frenzy with news, with all sorts of things, but the biggest thing that kind of affects us is that they announced a lot of stuff with Winterfest 2023, and all I have to say is bah humbug. We're a little disheartened with the news that there are four live shows that have been cut as part of the Winterfest event lineup for 2023. And again, these details were released earlier this week.
Yeah, that's right, Ryan. It is a little bit disappointing, to see these four shows, cut. Very popular with the guests, with four drummers drumming. You have Jingle Jazz, you have Blitzen's brass band, and the Holly Jolly Trolley. All those not part of the lineup this year. You're a season pass holder, Ryan. What are your thoughts when you see the lineup come out and there's not as much to see and do as there had been in previous years?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely disappointing. I would say that my main concern is, obviously, from a personal standpoint, looking at the shows that are down there, have been cut. Holly Jolly Trolley, I always thought was really, really neat. That seemed to go over well. But the show that really drew a crowd was Four Drummers Drumming. That always had a ton of people there. So even if people didn't notice that the other shows were gone, especially like Jingle Jazz was kind of a B show and Blitz and Band was
Mhm.
roaming. So people may not notice that. I think that they'll notice that Four Drummers Drumming is not there, don't you?
I do, especially, if you've been to the event, every year, or you go multiple times every year, it was a guest favorite. If you're a first time attendee of Winterfest this year, it's going to look, spectacular.
Mhm.
You're going to have all the lights, you're going to have the ice skating, you're going to have some of those marquee shows that are still there, the food,
Mhm.
different things like that. So it's going to look beautiful. It's going to look spectacular for you. But if you are somebody who is a veteran of going to Winterfest since it returned in 2017, you're certainly going to notice that it's not as much to see and do as you had seen in the years before.
Yeah, I mean that's been my concern from the beginning. If they had cut Tinker's Toy Factory or something like that, that would hurt a lot more from my standpoint, from an enjoyment standpoint. Um, I don't like I said, most won't notice that these four shows are missing, but what I think they'll walk away with is feeling like there wasn't enough to do. And I feel like that was the biggest downfall of Winterfest 2005. It was you could do it all in 2 hours, and then what do you do? So now we're down to the tree lighting, which is nice, but I mean, not everybody gets to see that because it's at 5 or 5:30. You've got Tinker's Toy Factory, you've got Cool Yule, and then you've got Swinging into Christmas. So three major shows. Uh, but besides that, I'm wondering if there's enough on the docket to keep people entertained for 5 or 6 hours a night.
Yeah, I mean that's a concern that I have about that. And I know when it first returned, one of the key messages was that there were 18 shows to watch at that point in time. Now, some things, now listed as an activity is,
Mm,
they do a better job than they did back in 2017 of breaking the event down to, what's what. So it's an activity on some of these things now. But um, yeah, I mean, they still got some great things though. I mean, the ice carvers, I think that is a great demonstration. Definitely, can't miss when you're there. You got cookie decorating with Mrs. Claus, very expensive now. The price has significantly jumped over the years. It's up to 24.99 for that. But I look at something like that, Ryan, and maybe you're different, but when, somebody tells me it's so expensive now to buy those cookies, I don't think, if you have, the husband, wife, and two kids, I don't think you put a price on the memories that that creates. You're all sitting around, you're doing an activity together. That's what it's about, doing things together during the holidays. And I think that, that price for the memories that you're going to have about that for years to come, I think, I don't have a problem with that. What about you?
it's I think 24.99 is fine. I think it's kind of expensive from an outsider looking in, but that especially compared to how it was like 8.99 the first year, which I think was terribly underpriced, to be honest with you. But I mean, if they can charge 24.99 and have a line out the door as they have, then more power to them. But I have done the cookie decorating a couple different times. It is fun. It's kind of almost like a character. uh, a character dinner at Disney World because you have Mrs. Claus and the elves and stuff that come around and interact with you. Um, but you're right. I mean, we haven't seen the cookies for this year, of course, and everything's subject to change. But in the past, you've always gotten very large cookies, so it was always a pretty good value. Um, but of course, you're cutting 4 shows, so who knows if you're going to get little silver dollar size cookies or something. I mean, we just don't know
No,
anymore.
no, no, you don't know. And the one thing that's been a staple at Winterfest, going back to the first one in 1982, is the ice skating on the Royal Fountain.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, just a tremendous, you know, guest experience when you get to do that. And when you're there in the summer, you always wonder if anyone ever goes in, has jumped in the pool and swam in there and those kind of things. But to skate on the ice in the fountain area and you look up and you've got the Eiffel Tower decked out as a 314-foot tall Christmas tree.
Hmm.
I mean, it's just beautiful. It's breathtaking. You got the lights down the side of International Street on the trees and the buildings.
Yeah.
Just makes it really a special night for you.
I agree, but the thing that the trap you also don't want to fall into is, you don't want to make it so you pay admission and then everything you want to do inside the park costs money. For like a season pass holder like me, I don't mind it. Kind of the opportunity to spend money there sometimes is kind of cool. I mean, like I don't mind spending money to ice skate. I think it's really fun. I don't mind spending money for Mrs. Claus's kitchen and that sort of stuff. It's kind of fun. But if you buy a ticket and you kind of expect it to be more encompassing and it turns out to do anything, it costs more. That's gonna kind of walk away with a little bit of a sour taste in some of their mouths, I imagine.
Yeah, I would think, you don't think about the math when you walk in and you're doing an event like that. But yeah, four of you were going to ice skate. I mean, that's $80 right there. You want to go do the cookie decorating, now you're over $100 there.
Mhm.
You want to get your picture with Santa, that's another whatever that's going to cost. So yeah, I mean, it does add up. But I do think, I always go back to, um, there was always a great value with that event. I mean, the experience and things, but then you circle back to what we're talking about here with the budget cuts and 4 shows not there and a lot less to do. Eventually, something has to give there. And, people might come right now, but if you've gone there for years, you're going to notice that there isn't as much to do. And instead of coming to Winterfest maybe 3 or 4 times as a pass holder, you might come once, maybe twice now because you've done everything.
Well, Don, there is a new thing to do because now allegedly you have 7 million lights to count. Because whether they had 3 or 4 million lights, according to the article that came out about Winterfest.
Yeah, it's an increase of 2 million
2
lights
million
over the
lights.
5 million. Yeah, so 7 million lights, that's a 40% increase in lights. So
Mm,
nobody's going to go around and count the lights,
right,
but you definitely will know, if there are significantly more lights, and 40% is significantly more lights, you'll notice that around the park. What I did notice was in talking about we're adding 2 million more lights, you're not saying where
right.
you're adding 2 million more lights. So where is that? Are you adding more lights to the train experience? That would be great.
Hmm.
People would be excited about that.
Right.
Are you putting more lights in Action Zone? Maybe now that you've got 2 rides open in Adventure Port, are you putting a lot more lights there? I'd like to see a little more depth than just throwing out a number saying we're adding 2 million more lights. Tell us where you're adding those lights so we can go look for those things and notice that it's different in those areas.
Right. And it's one of those things where if it's going to be that percentage of an addition of lights, if they make that claim, people are going to know if it's not true or not because that's a pretty significant jump.
Yeah, and now again, if you've never been there before, it's going to look beautiful. But if you have been there and it looks the same as it has before, maybe a few more lights here and there. I mean, we're talking 40% more lights. That's pretty impactful. And if that's the key message that we've got 7 million more lights right now, it's got to look like 7 million lights.
Yeah, so it definitely a trek ahead of them. Do you think that adding that, like, obviously, the park has a job to do in terms of they're not going to say like Winterfest is back with 4 less shows. Um, um, do you think that the addition of lights, how much do you think that offsets the cuts that we already know about?
Depends on how spectacular they look.
Right.
I think that's the big piece of it. I mean, that's a big part of it. So if it looks really immersive, really impressive, yeah, you get away with that. And there are a number of guests, and I've done this before when I've gone to different parks
Mhm.
and have experienced their winter events. I'm just as interested in looking at all the lights and how the buildings are decked out and the trees and those kind of things, the decor. That's as interesting to me and as exciting to me as it is doing some of these activities. So yeah, you can definitely have lights being a big part of that experience.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the event is very visual, from all regards. So
Yeah.
if they pull this off right, like maybe the event can be salvaged. But very disappointing news about those cuts. I guess a lot of us saw them coming after the second half of the season we saw and news of the merger and stuff like that. But
Yeah, and I want to talk about something. The one thing that I've grown up with Kings Island, right? So to me, Kings Island was always about being the best at what they did, being innovative, being the first,
right.
being the best,
Hmm.
being that seasonal park that everyone wants to go to. And when you see all these budget cuts, it's not the Kings Island anymore that I grew up with. So a little bit of disappointment there. I mean, I'd like to see them get back to what they were, what everyone remembered Kings Island as, for many, many years until a lot of these things started happening.
Yeah, I agree. It was about innovation and more and bigger and better. I think a lot of the grave they've dug for themselves in terms of making it such a season pass heavy park, where it's kind of like, you know, you you make the pass so available to so many people that pretty much everybody buys one, and then it's like, well, I mean, why would we do something during the season? We already got their money, you know. And I understand that from
It's a fine line that they have to walk. And let me bring something else up here
yeah.
too. Why I mentioned about how the park used to be in previous ownerships. Something like Winterfest was considered a gift back to the community, back to the season pass holders.
Mhm.
And if we made money on it, great. But if not, okay. It was something to do to kind of say thank you for your support during the summer. With Cedar Fair and the way it's set up, you can't do things just to do things. You have to answer to a lot of these, unit holders and everything, and you have to be able to make money on what you're doing, or you can't do it.
No, yeah, yeah, I completely agree. For me, it's more of a long-term thing where they augmented the season 5 or 6 years ago with Winterfest, and then if they start taking away the value in Winterfest, it's gonna be hard to justify the event, which kinda sucks if they got rid of it again for the 3rd time, but also, that
Yeah, I don't see that happening though.
well, no, but I'm just playing devil's advocate here. But I mean, they've got a lot of competition from things like the Cincinnati Zoo, and when it comes down to it, if there's not enough things to do at Kings Island, people are going to look at the price of both, and they're going to go to whichever one's cheaper, whichever one's more convenient. Fortunately, Kings Island right now, with all the season pass and stuff, is more accessible. So, Don, we've heard something about the walk around characters. Now there were 30 of them. What have we heard?
Well, I've heard that they were cutting 15 positions, and I've seen that mentioned on the different Kings Island fan sites. I've had people who worked in entertainment that have kind of passed that along that there were some cuts there. I think about the parade
Hmm.
and how immersive that was. And if you're cutting 4 shows, you're cutting a number of the walk around characters, the merriment characters. What does the parade look like?
That's a great question. Also, my concern is the tree lighting ceremony too, but we'll get to that. Let's talk about the parade real quick. So we discussed this a little bit in terms of a dozen, 15 performers from the shows that are cut that would normally be in the parade, and then on
Hmm.
top of that, 15 is that what they call them? Marymount, whatever, Merriment
Merriment
character. Okay,
characters.
but so we're talking 30 people. That's gonna put a lot of holes in the parade, so the only thing I can think of is less floats. So the parade is not, what was it, 7 floats, 6 floats, and it'll be maybe 4.
Well, I mean, you get to that point, and when you start cutting floats, it's more of a procession and not a parade.
It's a cavalcade, street party, like at the 50th.
Yeah,
Yeah, which did serve
exactly
its
with that.
purpose. But the tree lighting is very concerning for me because that's one of my favorite things. I think that the way they're gonna backfill all the extra spots is they'll probably not have a 5 o'clock Tinker's Toy Factory, have the elves perform in the show, and that will backfill, and then they'll only have 2 or 3 Tinker's Toy Factories. Um, Still very unfortunate, but, Yeah, Winterfest starts Black Friday 2023, so we'll see how it goes, and we'll definitely have some talks with different talking heads within the Kings Island enthusiast community to see what they think. Don, let's move on to
Yeah.
the user question.
All right, go ahead, read it.
Okay, so of course I'm put on the spot. So we got moving in. We've got a listener question from someone that goes by Troy on KI Central who claims to not have X but seems to always know what's going on X. Hmm. So anyway, just joking. But so he wants to know, I'd like to know if it was your idea, Don, to call and market Orion as a giga coaster. That's part 1.
No, I'll answer that question now. No, it wasn't my idea or anybody else's idea. The coaster fit into the specifications for a giga coaster. It was either a giga's either 300 feet tall or it drops 300 feet. Orion drops 300 feet, qualifies as a giga. So there wasn't anyone that had to come up with the idea to market it as a giga because it met the specifications for that.
Well, and I mean, giga is a term that Cedar Fair coined, so they can call whatever they want a giga. But yeah, anybody that would pitch the idea of marketing it as a really tall hyper would be fired because that's insane. Second part, I also would like to know your opinion on Orion versus other giga coasters in the chain. That's a fair question.
I would rank it behind Millennium Force and Fury 325. It's not in that level
Okay,
for me. It's a distant third behind those two.
it's a distant third. So that's a Fury and Millennium Force.
Millennium
Okay,
Force.
so you would put it above, Intimidator 305 then?
I do. I do. Yeah. It's a more enjoyable ride experience for me. It does more things. If you're into high speed, twists and turns, then yeah, Intimidator 305. But if you're looking for, that air time and the speed and the other things that Orion does, I would put Orion at number three. Solid number three.
Yeah, so I'm an oddball, and I've ridden 305, but not Fury. Um, I like Intimidator 305, but
I do too. I mean, I really like it. Like I said, it's fast. It's intense. That first drop is great. But if I had to pick one or the other to ride, I'm picking
yeah,
Orion.
interesting. Okay, let's move on to the next section of Troy's question. In your opinion, would you like to see giga additions to the legacy Six Flags parks now that they've merged with Cedar Fair? Little forward thinking, they haven't merged with Cedar Fair yet. But
No,
if
no.
assuming that the merger goes through, it goes through the way they stated. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think you're going to see it in the foreseeable future. You look at the debt that both of the chains have. They're not going to be able to go around and start, putting 30, $40 million coasters in all these parks. It's not just not going to happen right away. So, eventually you're going to see some, yeah, but not right away.
Yeah, and what's funny is, the last Giga Coaster that was installed was Orion, obviously, and I, in a lot of ways, don't think, and I might be stepping on your toes. That's fine. But I don't think that it generated the excitement that a normal Giga would. No, it opened in 2020. I understand that. But I think the story behind Orion, the narrative was it's 287 feet tall rather than it's this awesome big Giga coaster. I think that was a huge problem that should have been foreseen and that should have been overcome. But some of this stuff also stems from the beginning. We talked about I told you I kind of narrated like a teaser campaign that I would have done for it. And if anybody's following us on X/Twitter, let me know if I'm nuts for this. But uh, you've got meteors crashing into Earth, and you're trying to save the Earth, and yada yada yada. I don't remember the story because it was so poorly narrated. If you're doing a teaser campaign, wouldn't you want to have like big rocks laying random places around the park and more of them every couple weeks during the season rather than the end of the world as you know it? Like that was nonsense, and it didn't really have a payoff. That was such a swing and a miss, and I don't know how involved you were with that campaign, but the Banshee one built up, and it's like, okay, it's going to be scary. Okay, it's going to have to do with graves. Oh, okay, it's going to be scarecrows, stuff like that. And then, Mystic Timbers, it was falling trees and stuff like that. No, Ryan, or I'm sorry, Diamondback was illusions of snake bites and things like that. But this was just, it was just nonsense that just did not make any sense, did not have a payoff. It was confusing. I don't think it sold a single ticket. And I think as a result of that, the excitement wasn't there. And regardless of COVID, I think that Orion probably wouldn't have finished in the top 5 for new rides with golden tickets. And I think that if you open a Giga Coaster, if you spend $30 million and you don't generate that kind of excitement, you failed. Okay.
Well, Ryan, to address what you're talking about here, I can tell you though that um, Diamondback, Banshee, Mystic Timbers definitely had a lot more buzz and excitement going into the announcement and into the launch of the rides than Orion did. You can point to COVID or whatever you might, want to say for that reason, but yeah, I think, compared to the other three, it missed the mark.
I agree. Now I think that the ultimate product, like forget the ride. The ride's all subjective. It's not tall enough, it's tall enough, whatever. Fine, whatever. You and I have discussed a million times that statistics mean nothing once you're sitting on the ride, and the fact that it's 287 feet tall, if it was a few feet taller, it wouldn't matter. Um, I
Not at
I
all.
like the theming, and, they did do the thing with the meteor near the ride, and the fact that that wasn't done around the park, and fake news reports, and having the paranormal society, like, what is it? The Bureau of Paranormal Activity? Why didn't you have some of your some, not actors, but some of the performers dress up in uniforms for that and be looking at it and take pictures of that and put it on social or even send it to the news for a tongue-in-cheek thing. Like, so many opportunities, and it was just dropped. But I think that because of the fact that the ball was dropped so hard with Orion, that it soured him on the product. And I agree, it's going to be a while before you see a Giga Coaster at a Cedar Fair or a Six Flags park. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, it was one of those things that it just never got off to the right start for a variety of reasons. So, but that's going to wrap up another episode of Tower Topics. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to stay tuned for more episodes.
We'll see you next time.